Hi, welcome to Gender Nebulous. And this is a bit of a special because I was invited to go on to Talk TV and speak about the Gender Recognition Act. Now, I'm no legal expert, but I have been reading up, thanks to Victoria, on a few laws around transgender people and non-binary, because Vicky's present to me for Christmas, which I opened earlier because I'm cheeky,
Yeah.
was Transgender Law by
Bye. It's on your shelf.
Robin Mora Wright.
White.
White. I've not read it yet. I'm not even. I have.
Great book.
You know
I
what?
have a copy myself. I read it all the time. It's a really good reference
This is
for
this is
stuff that we talk about all the
yeah.
time.
This is actually an advert for this. We're not getting any. We don't get any
No, we're not
money.
getting any pay. We don't want any
No.
money.
So Moira, if you're watching,
We're doing it for the love of your book.
and send us some if you want.
Yeah, you can if you want, but we don't expect anything.
Yeah. Well.
So this show you went on, Talk TV, it was Kevin O'Sullivan, wasn't it? He's the host.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's not his show. It's somebody else's show that he sits in for.
Well, I got a phone call, and because what I'd done is I put a little press pack together, so it was like a bit of a
That's about to get you. You're getting a bit posh, aren't you?
No, but it is. It's because I asked somebody how you do it, and somebody that does this kind of thing. I asked them, well, when you do that, what's the best way to do it? And they kind of told me how to do it.
Doing a bit
And
of product placement now.
well, kind of. Oh, you are. Is it what's that Pellegrino?
Yeah, San Pellegrino. Orange. Sorry, I interrupted. That's not like me. You're normally the one that's interrupting. Go on.
Yeah. Well, you catch. Yeah.
I'm catching the disease.
Shut up.
Shut
Right.
up.
What was I going to say? I've lost my train of thought now.
Sorry, Kevin O'Sullivan. He's not his show.
No, I got
Press
a phone.
back. Press back.
Yeah, I was talking about that. So I put a few things together that I'd done before because I have been on shows, but mainly as a guest. When I listen to a lot of these things, I get angry and I ring up and I give them what for on the phone. So I thought, what am I doing, wasting my time and energy doing that when I could be invited on and they might pay me for it?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, anyway, but that was obviously that's not the main motivation because they pay fucking peanuts anyway. But she rang me, the producer from. Actually, you know what happened? They'd seen my thing on GB News, and the producer from Talk. It's actually Vanessa Feltz's show, but Vanessa's off at the moment. So they asked me whether come and talk. Now, at first I thought I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a lawyer. I don't. But I thought, well, the way that they posited it was, we just want you to come on and give us your perspective as a trans person. And the lady on the phone sounded nice, sounded genuine. But then she told me it was going to be Kevin O'Sullivan. Now, my heart sank a bit because I'd had a bit of a bust up with Kevin in the past. Because on Talk TV, it's like, imagine if you were listening to the audio book of the Daily Mail. That's what Talk TV is constantly. It's about immigrants. It's about.
Yeah, it's not good, is it?
It's about.
Pretty negative.
All these kind of like fear narratives, and it's very Tory. They get a lot of Tory think tank people on there. Tufton Street have like a direct line, I think, to talk.
They have a hotline, don't they? So Tufton Street.
But it was talk radio when I used to know that. But Kev does a show, or did do, I don't know if they still do it, called Plank of the Week. And I made a little Photoshop of him and Mike Graham, who's one of the other presenters. And I put two short planks and I posted it on the feed, and Kev was like,
he was not impressed.
He wasn't impressed. But I thought, if you're gonna have a show where you take the mick out of people and call them Plank of the Week.
I mean, if you dish it, you may as well be able to take it, right?
But the person they were calling Plank of the Week was Nicola Sturgeon. And the reason they don't like Nicola Sturgeon is quite obvious, really, because she presents this whole idea of Scottish independence. They don't like that. They don't like anybody not towing the imperialist party line. So anyway, so I'd had this little bust up with Kev. So I thought, should I do it? And I said, yeah, no, you know what? I'm going to do it. And it'd be so Kev already, I don't know if he remembered that, but I think he probably did, because I had been talking to him quite a lot, because the reason I first started ringing up Talk Radio, was because they put Kelly J. Keane on, Posey Parker.
So did he have her on quite a lot?
A lot, yeah, because when she was on, it was like, hi, Kevin, how you doing? Like as if they'd met at the pub. And I thought, this is wrong, because he either doesn't know what we know about her, or he chooses to ignore it, or he's along for that. He's happily to promote and amplify trans-exclusionary, that kind of transphobic rhetoric.
Well, they could probably, use the ratings, couldn't they?
Well,
So
yeah,
that's why they do it.
but some of the things, she's quite moderate when she's on there. I mean, she's not like she is on her own YouTube channel, I suppose, because they put that's worse though in a way, because they platform her as a kind of feminist, and he would introduce her as a women's rights campaigner, and I would say, no, that's not really what she's campaigning for. She might use the rhetoric and she might use the symbolism and the annotation of feminism, but she's definitely not. She sells T-shirts and she makes money doing that, but I don't see her do any kind of outreach work for actual women. I mean, people, I think she's got the kind of.
So it'd be better if they got on some real feminists and they could have a proper conversation then, wouldn't it?
But you see, that would challenge their worldview, because Nicola Sturgeon is a proper feminist. I mean, she might not even say, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, a feminist is either a loose description or it's a very firm description, depending on what angle of feminism you're taking. Because you could just say it's about equality, and that is one of the basic tenets of feminism, like that we're all equal in the eyes of the law. But we know that's not the case anyway. But anyway, so Kelly, she'd been on there, and it's really sad that they never had any. They've never platformed a trans woman as well. I think that's wrong, actually. Our friend Katie Neves has been on there with Ian,
on TalkTV, has she?
Yeah, with Ian Collins, because Ian Collins was saying, so what is it that J.K. Rowling has said that's transphobic?
Oh yeah, that usual catchline.
Yeah, well, obviously J.K. Rowling is very careful about what she does and doesn't.
Just look at her Twitter feed, you'll see everything.
But even that, I mean, I think she's happier to she.
Well, she put this week happy Turfmas, didn't she, or something like that?
Yeah, but that's kind of trolling.
I mean, but it's not nice, is it? Anyway,
well, she isn't nice. We know she's a raging transphobe. It's just
raging. So who's the co-host on this Kevin O'Sullivan show?
That's a lady called Daisy McAndrew, and Daisy McAndrew, she writes for a couple of ladies' magazines and newspapers.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with who she is, but
yeah. But she's nice. She was nice, And
then the person they were putting you up against was somebody called Susan Smith from Women Scotland.
For Women. I'm
not sure if it's For Women or is it just Women Scotland? I don't know. But
the organisation is called For Women Scotland.
Okay, so is that the same organisation that had the court case earlier this week?
Yeah.
Or is it a different one? I'm not sure. But anyway, Susan Smith, we can look that up and check. So you're ready to review the video?
Yeah. Yes. So I was definitely waiting on the phone and listening to what was going on. And just before I went on the other story about ambulance strikes, so I thought, have they got me mixed up? I can't.
Yeah, there was directly before yours. There was
there was a guy on the
Northwest Ambulance, and yeah.
There was a guy on the screen that I've actually met, and I was like, "Oh God!" I felt relaxed by that. It made me feel like they were talking. It was more my.
Yeah, I'm not sure who he was, but he was good. He was good.
Yeah, but he wasn't your typical heteronormative kind of guy, was he? So that's what I liked it. Yeah. Anyway, let's dive in.
Right, let's dive into this video. Okay, I'm going to hit the old play button.
We need sound effects.
Hang on, the music's coming. There you go.
Well, hello and welcome back. Now, politicians in Scotland will start voting today on the controversial Gender Recognition Reform Bill, which will make it easier for people to self-declare as their chosen gender.
Supporters and opponents of the bill are making their voices heard today ahead of tomorrow's final vote.
Well, joining us now live is the trans activist and host of the Gender Nebulous podcast, Freda Wallace, and also the director of Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Ladies, very warm welcome. Freda, just tell us a little bit more about what's going on north of the border today politically around this bill.
Well, politically, north of the border, what seems to be a weaponised performative argument that seeks to demonise trans people. And it seems to be coming from a very, very specific part. Because to me, the whole thing is, it's based on political leverage, and trans people are being used in that debate. So what they don't like really is Nicola Sturgeon. And the thing that's really in transition is Scotland itself. It's transitioning to a more progressive Scotland. It's transitioning to an independent Scotland. It's self-actualising in the same way trans women do. And some people, some conservatives in Whitehall don't like that. So what they'll do is they'll weaponise this debate, they'll make it about women's rights when it really isn't, they'll use lobbyists, and they'll use the kind of people that come onto this very TV station and try and weaponise and demonise trans women, as I've seen Kev do many times on this station, and that's how it works. It's got nothing to do with helping women. And it's got nothing to do with how, I mean, it helps trans people in the sense that it stops me having to fill in so many forms. That's all it does. I self-ID now. I don't need to be rubber stamped by the government to be who I am. I am who I am now. And nobody's checking my paperwork when I use single-sex spaces. It's just social politeness, and it's to do with modesty. I'm no threat to anybody.
Nobody said you were, Freda, but I think that what critics of the Gender Recognition Reform Bill say that it will make it too easy for younger people who are perhaps confused to make life-changing decisions that will alter the rest of their existence, perhaps at a too young an age. So that to make this too easy is possibly not beneficial for a lot of young people. That's the criticism.
Right, so that was your opening salvo. You went straight in there with your.
So my point really, which I fudged a little bit because I kind of repeated myself. The kind of rules of when you're talking like this is, don't hesitate, don't repeat, and what's the other one? Don't hesitation, repetition. Anyway,
yeah,
I'm doing it now.
You were on a roll for the beginning, like you went straight in.
But I was.
I don't think you actually drew breath for the first minute there. It's like,
yeah, because I knew I was limited. I knew, right, it was going to be limited on time. They said like 5 minutes, and I didn't want to miss. The idea was trying to explain is this. I mean, it's really important. I don't want it to look like I don't think this is important to trans people, because it really is. But for me personally, it doesn't define. It's not. They think it's this defining thing where you become trans at the point you get a GRA or a self-ID. That is not the point of which you become who you are.
It's just paperwork at the end of the day.
It's not the point. It's not the bit where they always say this, like the government will allow people to be trans. That's not a government decision. You know what I mean? It's a personal one. It's a philosophical one. It's a medical one if you choose to go down that path. If the government started saying, right, if you want to have this treatment, what you've got to do is get 2 doctors to write to us, and then you've got to... It's absolutely ridiculous to think that... And he start... Like, the first thing he comes in with is about children. Now, you see why they do that is because they can make this a safeguarding issue.
Yeah. Well,
and really... and you'll hear what I'll come back with that in a minute. But the first bit was me trying to say, this is not the big deal you're making it out to be. Never as a piece of legislation been mulled over for so long and fine-tuned. If every piece of legislation had to go through this process,
nothing would ever get done in Scotland.
Nothing would get done.
Yeah. So just a bit of background. What they're talking about here is the Gender Recognition Act reforms in Scotland, which is in its 3rd stage debate this week in Scottish Parliament, and it's been going on for 2 days now. I think it's going to go to a 3rd day tomorrow, where they actually have another debate and then they'll have the vote. So it's been like 4 or 5 hours per day of this stuff, like just going on and on and on about amendments and. Just a lot of gerrymandering and...
gerrymandering, I had to have that explained to me what gerrymandering was, because I kept seeing this word, I was thinking gerrymandering.
Just like delaying and tactics to delay it. I think what the Conservatives are trying to do is just delay it so much that they'll kick it over to next year, which gives them more time to come up with some more stupid arguments. So,
well, we know...
I mean, the two main things that I think Dan Sorry, Kevin. Dan was last time.
We're getting out of Dan's.
Yeah, Kevin's what's going to talk about here is first of all, they're reducing the age from 18 years old to 16 in Scotland. That's one of the things.
Well, yeah, but
and the other thing is they want to remove all the medical aspects out of the act, so that you don't have to go and get this 2 medical reports and 2 years, living in gender and all the medical stuff that goes along with it. So, they want to shorten that down to 3 months with a 3-month reflection period. And then for under 16s, I think it's 6-month reflection period. So, yeah, there's a lot of changes around medical things that are going on, basically removing it. And, he's focusing straight onto the kid thing because that's where they kind of focus all their attention.
And also, the other point I was trying to make is that Scotland itself is going through a transition.
Yeah, I like the way you did that.
And it is, and it's what's happened is, I did a tweet earlier, and I said it was a bit of a joke, but I said, "Suck it up, transphobes. Scotland is self-actualizing. She's becoming independent. Scotland is on hormones."
Yeah, so it's like Nicola Sturgeon has become like the main target, not just for political things around, Scotland leaving the UK, but also on this issue of the, Gender Recognition Act reforms. Like they're using this as a way to kind of manipulate that other situation.
If I can just come in with what you just said there, Nicola Sturgeon, it's like a pincer movement for Nicola Sturgeon, because they know, because of the fractious nature of what happened with Brexit, most of Scotland voted to stay in the EU.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So in a possible independent Scotland, they could have a vote and say, look, Scotland, why don't we be part of the EU?
Mm-hmm.
But that could seriously happen now. And they can still not point to any tangible benefits of Brexit. They can only point to negatives. And every time anybody asks, it's like that question of, is J.K. Rowling transphobic? They'll say, so when you ask them, so what's been good about Brexit? And so it's like this. It's not one thing, is it? It's not something there's an answer to, because the problem isn't as simple as that. Anyway, that's why Sturgeon is getting it so heavy from all sides. And I mentioned Mary Black, but she's not. She's a Westminster lady.
She's a Westminster
but she's campaigned and she's spoken loads this year about this subject, and she's great.
She is. Yeah. All right, let's continue.
Well, the thing is with that, if you was to go to a gender clinic now, say you were as young as 12, you would be 15, 16 years old by the time you even got seen by a psychiatrist. And that's before you have any medical intervention whatsoever. Even if you had medical intervention, there would be no surgery unless you went private, which is prohibitively expensive. So you would have to have both parents on board, you would have to have legal support, and it would never happen. And in this country at the moment, there is no support for anybody under 16 anyway. So that is a misnomer.
Let me bring Susan. Susan, Freda has said that the only people who are opposed to this are people like Kevin, as Freda said, and people, south of the border, a bunch of conservatives, Freda said. And Freda also said it's got nothing to do with women's rights.
I didn't say that.
Did you say all that? I don't think you actually said all that at all.
I might have mentioned right-wing or conservative. I don't know if I did, but when I say conservative, I don't mean conservative with a large C. I mean capital C. I mean socially conservative people that see this trans thing as the way Kevin is portraying it, as a moral panic. That's saying that it's not that you hate the idea of trans people, but it's like you could be convinced that there's a panic that children are being medicalized and all this.
Talk about this medicalization of children, and no child gets surgery until 18 anyway, even if they can get into a gender identity clinic.
Well, this
the only thing you'll get before you're 18 is puberty blockers, and that's only via going through a gender identity clinic, the one that they had for kids, which is going to close and get replaced by some new ones.
But even so, your GRC, your self-ID, would not. It doesn't open the gate to that. You've still got to
completely different.
You've got to have a psychological assessment. You've got to see at least. It's not one appointment. Sometimes these people think you knock on the doctor's door, they say, "Yeah, come in," and when you leave with the prescription.
Oh, if only.
And that is, but there's. It's the opposite is true. You have to go through this process of seeing the doctor, seeing the psychiatrist, and then they ask you the correct. I mean,
but this is one of the things with the current system which delays trans people from getting their GRC, because they can't, do the application until they've got all this paperwork from the medics.
Yeah,
that goes along with the application for your GRC. So you could be, ready to do your GRC. You could have gone past your 2-year period and still not be able to get your paperwork from your from your GIC because you're not been able to see them yet. So how do you even apply for your gender recognition certificate?
I just want to say before we go on to the next bit, there's something that really is funny that just came to me. I was talking about this with somebody at work today, and they didn't know that getting a passport or a driving license is separate to this, because they asked me, do I have a GRC? I said, no, I'm going to apply, but I've only just been able to do it. And they said, oh, right. So can you not go abroad? And I said, what do you mean? I said, yeah, it says female and Freda on my passport.
Yeah.
And they said, well, what do you need it
totally
for?
Separate.
What do you need it for then? And I said, well, that's a good point. But these shows, these journalists,
they don't really know what they're talking about.
They play into the hands of the fact that the public haven't got a clue about this. So it takes some. I mean, I'm not saying.
For the record, you can change your driving license, you can change your passport way before you get your GRC. All you do is send off the applications, follow the process. For your passport change, you have to get a letter from your doctor. I mean, that's it.
And that can take a day.
And you need a deed poll for your name change. But that's it.
That's it. But I did that within a month. And it's, and if it's say if I did want to detransition, I don't, but if I did, it's not a massive deal, is it? It's not like, it's not.
People change the details on the passport and driving license all the time.
It's like if I got married and my name changed, or which I don't plan on doing, but I still think all women should keep their original surname from day now. Stop doing that, because it changes history, and it's really hard for me to research female artists. Stop doing it. So what I'm saying is the public perception of this is very narrow. So when they say somebody like my mom, who watches all this kind of shite, she watches Loose Women and stuff, so they do mention these things on those kind of shows, and they don't give the full picture.
No, they just focus on the snippets that they kind of understand in their own simplistic way, and they never explain all the real details and what's really involved.
Because usually on those kind of TV shows on the daytime, if you see a trans woman, it's from the point of view, it's a woe is me story, like she's had some kind of horrible thing, and oh, this is my journey. And it's like, no, we're not. I mean, we've all got troubles in our life, whether we're trans or not. We don't sit on a sofa with Holly and Phil and talk about them. I mean, I'm not stopping saying that's a bad thing if you want to share your story as a trans person. I think that's absolutely fantastic. What I'm saying is that's the only version of us that most people get.
This is true. Yeah. So should we let Susan talk?
No.
All right.
Freda mushwished.
Here she comes.
I mean, that's an absolute load of nonsense. I'm not sure that either J.K. Rowling or Joanna Cherry can be described as conservatives. And
she said J.K. Rowling. I can't believe it.
Socially conservative.
Can you ever in the SNP? Then that's clearly not true. I mean, this is heavily opposed in Scotland. The majority of Scots do not want this.
Now, the majority of Scots don't want this?
That's not true.
That is not true. Where on earth is that?
Okay. If imagine this was a referendum, right? And you were going to ask it's not everybody in Scotland doesn't have to. This is goes back to that Brexit thing I was talking about before. If you had a vote and anybody in Scotland could vote for it, and you'd listen to her arguments constantly, if you were bombarded by her arguments constantly on social media, if you were bombarded by all this on Twitter, and then somebody asks you, do you think children should be able to identify as trans? Your tick is going to say no, because you've not understood. You've not understood it. And that's what happened with Brexit.
It is, I mean, I can show you a bit of an example of what happened with Brexit. You know, when for most of that period of time from like 95 until 2010, I was outside the country. So I was not subjected to all the anti-European talk.
Yeah.
Right. So when I came back in 2010, I was like, why is everybody anti-Europe in this country all of a sudden? Because when I left in 95, they weren't. You know, so I've come back and there's like, you know, Nigel Farage is on the TV every night. And there's this continuous like anti-European, anti-European.
Oh, they used him.
Yeah. The anti-European thing just kept going on. Anti-EU, not European. Anti-EU, anti-EU. So I reckon during that period I was away, there was a lot of brainwashing going on around Brexit, and which I missed out on, thank God, because I was away. But then if you look at how the Scottish voted versus how the English voted, you know, we're on the same island. Why is there such a big difference? And it's because of how the English have probably been more bombarded with this negative stuff from the Tories, whereas the Scots haven't.
Yeah, well, I know.
That's the difference.
I mean, I talk to a lot of people in work and not just colleagues. And I noticed, because my attitude was, I'm not going to vote. What's the point? We're not going to leave the European Union. Don't be daft.
Guess what? We did.
But we didn't pay much attention to. But what I started to notice, talk radio that's not talk TV, it was Nigel Farage all the time, and they were like the Brexit channel, like Julia Hartley-Brewer, Mike Graham, absolutely in for it.
Like they were all on TV every night for.
But do you know where this
on end?
Have you heard this organization that was called Cambridge Analytica?
Yeah.
Do you know what? Well, we're not gonna
go down that rabbit hole.
But what I'm trying to explain is the same lobby groups, the same Tufton Street. It's Tufton Street. Came out of there are the same people attacking trans people now. It's the same devices. It's the same. They've learned from Brexit and they're using it on other things now, and they're testing it on us.
But it's interesting how you can have two nations, you know, sharing the same island with completely different views on the EU, possibly related to the way that they were, you know, bombarded with media over the period running up to the referendum. You know, why is there such a big difference? You know, it's very telling.
Yeah, but I mean, it shows you how easy it is to manipulate.
It does, yeah.
If you give fear narratives all the time, and if you tell people there's this awful future if you don't do this, and there's this beautiful, you know, sunlit uplands if you do this, and it's like, you know, people like simple narratives because if you have to imagine I wonder how many people have sat through the hearing of the Scottish Parliament today.
Well, I have.
Well,
and it's been torture.
But not everybody is as sad.
It's quite an interesting learning experience, actually. Learning, you know, seeing how they operate in the Parliament.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not mocking it. I'm just saying most people don't. So what they do,
it was very boring too.
What they do rely on is talking points on the news. So people that think of themselves as well informed might think they're being informed by watching Newsnight, but they're not really, because they're getting the tip of the iceberg, aren't they? Whichever,
just getting the same information, just recycled all the time.
But do you remember the thing when Jeremy Corbyn was running for Prime Minister? They slaughtered him. I mean, don't get me wrong, Jeremy Corbyn was never the answer to anything.
No, but he was targeted.
But nobody has ever had their character assassinated so viciously in politics, I don't think, and painted as, I mean, he was literally Hitler, wasn't he, at one point? And I mean, anyway, I'm not going to go on that. But if you want to learn more about that, watch Alexi Sales podcast where he interviews Jeremy Corbyn. It's fascinating. And I'm not getting any money off Alexi Sale either.
So let's get back to Susan's message.
This has got nothing to do with wider issues. And the fact is, it's quite clear that Freda's losing the debate because has to go down this really silly path.
You're losing the debate, Freda. It's going down a silly path.
Did the lady say he then? I'm sure
I don't know. I don't know.
Can you rewind that? Is that possible? I'm sure she said he.
Don't think I can easily.
Well, if anybody,
But anyway, it doesn't matter.
We can watch it back on. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if she did, because it was nice that Daisy McAndrew opened it with "Welcome, ladies." Me? Where's she?
Good old lady. What lady? So, yeah, I mean, silly. Is it silly, Freda? What you said?
No, it's obvious I'm losing the argument.
You're losing the argument.
If you have to tell the room that you're losing the argument, you know that's not.
Yeah, I mean that's a sign of having lost the argument. Anyway, carry on.
See, the thing is, I didn't have an argument. I had it wasn't an argument really. It was me just saying.
You were answering the question that was posed to you, and
I
you
don't
think silly.
It's not this sides thing, right? It's not like there's this thing here which is valuable, and this thing over here which is just as valuable. It's not like that. It's this thing here that's bullshit, and me trying to tell you why.
Okay, back to Susan.
The basic fact is...
Can you explain the silly path to me?
Excuse me, I am speaking now. The basic fact
I am
of the matter
speaking
is
now.
You cannot change sex, and that people who are male are consistently a threat to women. It doesn't matter about their identity. It doesn't mean not all men, etc., etc. Not all trans people, obviously. But we measure that threat based on their sex, not on what they feel about their clothing preference or the pronoun preference.
Right, so why is she talking about men being a threat? I thought we were talking about the Gender Recognition Act.
Because, well, we know why.
Yeah, so she's automatically conflating men with trans women.
What's going on in her mind now is, I need something that frightening. I need something that is. So she sits around a table and
she's trying to sell that trans women and men in dresses.
Yeah, but she sits in. She's on WhatsApp groups where these people complete each other's sentences. Yeah. So all her talking points are things that they constantly say and have agreed to say in public on things like this, because they have been at an agreement that these are the things we need to push, because this is what brings the public into this idea of being peaked. And it's a kind of psychological grooming. So they have these talking points that they will continue. So when somebody offers a different approach, it's obvious that Freda's lost the argument, because I've not lost anything.
Being silly, basically.
I've presented you with an alternative way to think about this, in the sense that you can't stop. You can't. There's not going to ever be a world where trans people don't exist. So you're either going to have to deal with that or stop harping on about it. Do you know what I mean? Mm. If you can, it's her problem to own. It's not our problem. We are not the problem, right? We are never the problem. I'm not saying, we'll get in arguments, and sometimes we'll be aggressive and sometimes we'll be confrontational. That's normal. That's not being a bad person.
Everybody does that.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. But whenever I've done that, and she's doing it there by saying, I'm speaking now, it's like saying that let women wish thing. That women won't wish, and it's like let women speak, and it's like women's voices must be heard. Yes, they must be, but don't use that to shut me down and make me. Well,
you're a woman speaking too,
Yeah, but because it's misogyny. It's like saying, "Shut up, you," because your class of person, what you are, is less valuable than the class of person I am. Mm. And what this is, I mentioned it in the last podcast: cis women's tears.
Oh yes,
and it's this, going back to that idea that white woman's tears, where if you can go, oh my god, oh no, please stop it, you're frightening me now. No, sorry, love, I'm aggressive because I care about what I'm saying.
But Susan, explain to people why you think this legislation does formulate a threat.
Because it opens up a process to anybody. And right now, at this moment, some amendments are being debated in the chamber, and these amendments are about stopping people who are convicted of really serious sex offences being allowed to take advantage of this system. And the fact is, the Scottish Government and the Green Party are not even prepared to stop sex offenders awaiting trial, changing their sex, and then presumably trying to leverage themselves into a women's prison.
Okay, now on this issue of, sex offenders changing their sex. Okay, so the way I think about this is that, your gender or your sexuality is a basic human right. Anybody has a right to change that. And, it shouldn't be this thing about being allowed to change your gender based on not having a criminal record. It's kind of using it as a punishment to prevent you from, changing your gender because you have a criminal record. Therefore, you're not allowed to change your gender. Now, would you do that to anybody who's not trans? Would you take away the gender of a criminal man? It's like, well, you can't take people's gender away. You can't take people's identity away because they just happen to be criminals as well.
Well, what happened?
It's a basic human right that stays with you. It's not something you control or you don't. It's like being left-handed. I'm going to take away your human rights because you're left-handed. It's ridiculous.
There's a couple of nuances to this, and I think there will be in existence the kind of men who think they could get an easier ride, who think that saying they're going to change sex is going to give them some kind of, cachet or just an easier. They will do that because people are, there's a possibility of anything of that in the human mind. If you're faced with like being sent down, and the fear of that almost, whatever you've done, I don't know. It depends. See, this is like this case by case basis that we talk.
So we see the building into this new reformed Gender Recognition Act some laws around making a false declaration and not doing it honestly. There's all kinds of rules are built into it now.
Oh yeah, of course.
So if someone did it nefariously, there's consequences, serious consequences of doing that. So, but just getting back to the point around, not allowing somebody to change their ID or the gender identity because they're a criminal. You wouldn't apply that same rule to cisgendered people. So why were you trying to apply it to trans people? You can't remove people's. If you were to remove from criminals, if you were to remove their gender identity, everybody in prisons would have no gender.
Well, there's a lot of psychology in that idea of it would be hard to conjecture, but I should imagine if you're faced with a prison sentence, that's when you would reassess your life. I should think if you were any kind of human being, and that might be when feelings of that might come out because suddenly you've got fuck all to lose, and suddenly your life is not the same life you were going to have, and suddenly you're a complete nothing because the system has made you one. So you sort of have your identity taken away when you go to prison, don't you?
Well, you do. You enter into a whole new.
You become a number.
Where you do lose some of your rights, but you
and there is a philosophy of that where your identity is very ephemeral, and that's why prison is such a punishment. Because if you no longer have freedom to express yourself, you don't have the freedom to, even in minor ways. This is something that I have thought about, but the problem is the way Susan is positing it is this is a reason for not having a GS for stopping the. But
denying it,
that's not a reason for that because
no, exactly
because it wouldn't change anything really because it'd be such a difficult decision for a board of governors or a prison board to make. Like I have said before, like say if I did some heinous crime and I was involved in some kind of
but stripping your gender away wouldn't make any difference.
Armed robbery and all this, and say I'd done something horrible, and then I'd go to court, go to prison, and they'd do a risk assessment, say right, what we're going to do with this one. It wouldn't be
based on the real risk. It doesn't really matter what your gender is at that point.
Well, it just comes like I've said this before about a lot of these debates. It comes down to risk assessment, This is why I want somebody like Mick Lynch in charge, because he'd go, let's have a look at it. Right, yeah, done the risk assessment. Yeah, get on with it. But there's no emotion involved. It's just about facts and figures.
Well, it's interesting that this thing that she's talking about, this amendment she's talking about in the Scottish Parliament thing that's been going on, that amendment was rejected. So,
yeah, but the whole that little waffle that was going on there, that train of thought, has not really anything to do with the reason that Susan Smith is making this argument. I don't think for 1 minute she would be thinking about the welfare of women in prison if she couldn't see it through the lens of trans people. She puts on these glasses that say trans whatever, and everything she sees is coming through that focal plane. It's very narrow, it's very precise, and it's like a telescope, and it's very clear to her.
Yeah.
But it's very narrow, and it's concentrated, and it's intense, and it's emotional, but she's not taking into account the bigger issue, like the wider issue, why women are in prison, what is the systemic misogyny that puts women in prison. Think about that. Looking the wrong way.
That is why women's rights activists are right.
That's a complete nonsense, and you know it is.
That is why UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls said it opens the door. And it's not a nonsense, because that is what is happening.
It's absolutely a nonsense, and I'll tell you why it's a nonsense. The women who fought for women's rights in the 19th century didn't fight on the basis of sex definitions. They understood that the oppression was societal. They understood that it was societal and economic and political.
Susan, let Freda finish. She let you finish.
So, yeah, she just starts having this weird kind of laughing fit, totally inappropriate.
Well, I think she did that because I wasn't buying what she was selling, because
you were trying to tell her something, from your point of view, and she just laughs at you as though she's trying to dismiss what you're saying as some kind of joke.
Yeah, but
it's really what she's doing there was really, I don't know what the word is. It was pretty rude.
Well, it's condescending.
Yeah, it was, and
it makes her look. I mean, these people are people that go in the media all the time, and I've done.
Keep it professional. You don't burst into laughter when the other person speaks. It's just, you just don't do that, do you?
But she's never had this happen to her, has she? She's never had apart from on Twitter maybe, where she just blocks people, which she has to me. When she's challenged, she doesn't take it seriously, because she sees this trans rights activist thing in that narrow tube, which I've already described.
Yeah.
So what's happening here is I'm trying to look at the thing holistically. I'm trying to say, what does this mean for society? It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about where we're going as human beings in a society, and what we need to do is look at it like as a risk assessment. Just look at it like that, and stop bringing these emotional, manipulating arguments in, because you've got an agenda that you just it's a horse she can't get off now because she's been on it too long. I'm not sure I'm going with this metaphor, but
stuck in the saddle.
Yeah.
All right, let's carry on now. Let's carry on.
They knew it was their identity as women, as expected members of society, which was important. It wasn't bodily function and to do with the body. They wanted to be liberated from their bodies, not be defined by them. Sex doesn't matter, gender matters, because that's the social world we live in. We live in a world of gendered language, and that's how we communicate with each other.
Freda, we haven't got much time. I need you to address what Susan, just 1 minute. I just want, Susan, please, just... Freda, I want you to address what Susan was just explaining, saying that it's being debated whether or not people who are accused of sex crimes can change their gender.
So she was having a meltdown in the background there.
Yes, so Daisy McAndrew there recognised that I hadn't really addressed what she was saying. But see, the problem with me is I'm so used to hearing these arguments that they come through, they just go over my head now, because I'm so not over my head, but they're just I'm just so used to it that I don't hear it anymore.
Yeah, so let's hear your response then.
If you're in a prison, you lose your rights. Having a GRC wouldn't change that. It's to do with risk assessment. And prison governors, people that work in prisons, try to work hard to reduce. Now, you're going to get mistakes, and you're going to get instances where that goes wrong. But there is
Made
a
mistake.
Would that be like the
no
mistake they
difference.
made with the prisoner who was in a male
Karen
prison?
White. You're going to mention Karen White, aren't you?
Yes, who went to
Because
a
it's the
women's...
only... Because it's the only
who
one
went
you can
on to
think
rape
of.
two...
Yeah, so Karen White, the only one you can think of.
Yeah,
You
it's
said you
always
made a
Karen
mistake.
White.
What was your mistake?
Well, the mistake there was that I was talking about prisons and prison governors, and we know there's lots of abuses there. And I should have mentioned that really, because I don't advocate for prisons. I don't think anybody should be in.
But one of the issues
prison.
with prisons, and I think we've spoken about this before, is that male offenders do use the, I'm trans as a currency in prison.
I think that's completely possible. But
Yeah,
I don't think
because it's they get a better they get a better kind of treatment, and they might get moved into a different prison.
I don't necessarily think they would get better treatment. I think they might get abused. But the thing is, they might think. See, this is the thing. If say some prisoners will listen to this and go, "Oh God, do you know what? She might be right. She might be right. That woman." And then they say to the prison officers, "I need a meeting," and then they'll be like, "No, sorry, mate. You're in prison." And then what does that do for their reputation in a prison? What does that? Nobody's thinking about it.
I think the important thing about prisons is that all prisoners go through risk assessment when they come in.
Yeah. And let's face it, though. Let's face facts. There's going to be very, very few, and it's not that. When I say things are very, very few, I'm not saying they don't matter. What I'm saying is, for that lady who's Smith, who's having this argument, she's cherry picking the things that will get people's synapses go, oh yeah, prison.
Yeah, well, I mean, all the things you're bringing up are like a repeat of what all the amendments have been brought up in this.
Yeah, but we don't need these.
The same things over and over again.
It's like a set menu, isn't it? Of
argument that every single one of these amendments that people have been throwing at, the Scottish government, they've all been rejected. I think there was only one that went through, and it was a really minor thing.
Yeah, but it's like every day you'll see these arguments on Twitter, and no matter how many times, somebody could come up with the most brilliant analysis of this, but it never stops the argument, because the argument is emotional. If the argument was based on facts, it would be resolved, but it's not. It's based on emotional. It's based on manipulating that part of us that fears things, that thinks there's something invading, that thinks there's something alien, and it's very powerful, and it gets in people vote based on this crap.
It gets people's emotions up. It does.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I would like to think that if I did go to prison, I'd get a nice room and TV and a PlayStation, like all these people in the Daily Mail think that every prisoner gets.
Well, make sure you take your, that I want to see that same background when you're in.
Yeah.
So we can still do podcasts.
Oh yeah. Well,
you put a request into the.
Well, I'm not going to get found out about my crimes. So when you find the bodies, Vicky.
It's a confession. Let's continue.
Two of the inmates.
No, she didn't rape. She sexually assaulted, but that doesn't make it any better. But that was the Daily Mail article, wasn't it?
Oh, so if it's in the Daily Mail, it doesn't count. Is that right?
Correct.
He writes for the Daily Mail.
Daily Mail. If it's in the Daily, it's not right. Correct.
But what I should have said there is, actually, Kev, you're right, because it's in the Telegraph, it's in the Times, it's in the Express, it's in the Sun, it's in almost every.
Why is Kevin defending the Daily Mail?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? No, if you look at who's on the TalkTV roster, that might give you some kind of indication. And who owns Talk Radio? TalkTV, sorry.
Yeah. Do they?
Do you know who owns?
Do they own the newspaper as well?
He's called Rupert Murdoch.
Oh, yeah, there you go then.
Rupert the Bear.
Okay.
Barefaced liar.
I think Kevin's got a few more things to say. Let's have a listen.
Rupert the barefaced liar.
No, I'm saying that's the only.
So that's the kind of awful mistake that we need to avoid, isn't it, Freda?
No, it's not.
Yeah, no, we don't need to avoid it. Let it carry on happening, shall we?
Kevin, you have platformed Kerry J. Keane on this TV station.
Don't start that. We're not here to interrogate me about who I have on my shows. So thanks very much for that.
Yes, we are, Kev.
No, we're not actually. It's not your show, Freda.
It's not Kev's show either. But anyway, that's the difference.
It says Vanessa Phelps on
Vanessa's show. So let's.
Vanessa's watching this at home fuming.
Say, what are you doing on my show?
Susan, we do have to worry. It is a problem, is it not, if we make it too easy for very young people to self-identify, just say, I want to identify as a woman, and they might make decisions that will affect the rest of their lives. That is what we have to guard against, and that's possibly the problem with this bill.
Yeah, and I would urge anybody to go back and listen. They've just discussed the amendments on the age limit.
Rejected.
And they were defeated, of course. And there was a great speech by several MSPs, and Kenny Gibson spoke at great length about detransitioners and the evidence that was given in Parliament by Sinead Watson, just the really terrible things that these young people have gone through.
That bit there, she's talking about detransitioners and Sinead Watson. Now, are you aware of Sinead Watson?
No.
Sinead Watson is a detransitioner that the LGBT Alliance have promoted and boosted a Twitter account. I think J.K. Rowling has. And she had a meltdown a couple of weeks ago on Twitter. A meltdown. She had, I think she was drunk or something, and she said something about, she was full on transphobic, like to the point of saying, you're all a bunch of perverts. And then she came back and she said, I'm okay now. I've managed to speak to Vicky Gervais and J.K. Rowling. And I was like, bloody hell, they'll be seething now that they've been. Because if anybody ever asks you, is J.K. Rowling transphobic? Then if you're going to be friends with somebody that says something like that and use them as a detransitioner, then you don't have to think too long about it, do you? And I've got the screenshots of that. And anybody asks me if J.K. Rowling's transphobic, I'll show them that. Because this is somebody, I mean, I'm sure we all, see, when it's detransition, the way that they've boosted her account is that when anybody ever disagrees with that Sinead Watson, they think we're doing it because we don't think there's such a thing as detransitioners. We know there is. I did it myself. I came out when I was 17 and I couldn't go through with it. It was too much pressure. And I was socially transitioning and I went back and I just stopped doing it because it was just too much pressure. So I have got every empathy and sympathy with that. I don't think anybody should be demonized for being, people, if you whatever it is you want to do, the gender clinics will support you. They won't say, oh, you're not trans, go away. They know you're still under their care. But what people like J.K. Rowling and Ricky Gervais have done, they've seen that as evidence that trans is not a thing. And they've used those people mercilessly. Yeah. Now, when I tried to reach out to Sinead Watson and say, look, they're being used. She was just abusive because she's got a lot of sustenance and a lot of what she thinks is compassion from these celebrities, and I think that's really sad. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I think we should also mention that she's kind of trying to tie this to the reforms in the Gender Recognition Act, and there's nothing in the act which says you can't change your mind. I don't really get the point there.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's not about this change your mind thing. It bugs me a bit because, it's not like suddenly.
Well, most people who detransition, I mean, it's because of the pressure. It's because of the pressure that they face in society and the way society treats them. That's why they detransition, if you want to call it that.
But they always go on about mutilation and surgeries, but that is a choice. If you want to, I don't have to have any kind of medical surgery to be who I am.
Not.
But if I choose to, and it is a choice, that is separate to being trans. And these people don't get that. It's like women, cis women, when they have breast implants or when they have a tummy tuck or whatever it is they do to their faces, nobody's saying, oh, you're mutilating yourself. Well, yeah, actually, some people would actually. But what I'm saying is they don't do it from the point of view of your gender. They don't say, oh, you're trying to be more female. You're doing woman face, or you're trying to be a stereotype. They never say that, because the stereotype is the thing that's misogynistic anyway. So it's celebrated in a way, to be the idea of the perfect woman or the perfect man, whatever it is. I think I was talking about this on our little, when we were out having a drink of wine, and
you were when I recorded you.
Yeah.
Maybe we should add that to the end. I don't know. No, maybe not. So we're almost at the end now. Let me just let it play for a bit.
And how they have not had adequate psychological counselling, and they've been set on this path with no way back. And what we are seeing now is this 4,000% increase in girls being reported. Obviously, the Hilary Cass review has led to the Tavistock closing down. This isn't happening in Scotland. We are so behind the curve on this. We know that countries like Sweden, Finland, France are now moving to stop puberty blockers, and we are going full steam ahead. And as
behind the curve, stop.
Yeah, but what do those countries
about there?
What do those countries she mentioned have in common? They have a right-wing encroaching.
Yeah, I mean, if those countries are changing laws around, transgender healthcare, yeah, I mean, they're all right-wing. Yeah. If that's something that she's proud of or wants us to do as well, I mean, that just shows politically where she's sat.
Yeah.
As was said in the debate today, what clinicians are worried about is that if somebody, a child, because these people are still children, turn up at the GP with a certificate saying, I have now changed my legal sex, they will then be wanting to go on to take medication, because that is the experience in countries such as Denmark.
Susan, we have run out of time, but I'm aware that, Susan, you've had more airtime than Freda has. Freda, you were shaking your head then. As briefly as you can, just because of the time limits, give us your response to what Susan said.
Final word to Freda.
Well, I think what would help those children that have got gender dysphoria and they've got psychological problems, whatever you want to call it, it would be better would be help them. We didn't amplify and weaponize the views of trans hostile lobbyists from Whitehall who seek to influence votes, use fear-mongering narratives and scare ordinary people into talking some nonsense. And that would be nice, just to understand those children. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Freda Wallace, and I'll make sure next time I book a guest for my show, I get your approval first.
So there you go. You're now the show guest approver, and Merry Christmas.
Well, I was being a bit sarcastic at the end, but no, I wasn't being irreverent there. I just wanted to end with it because I knew the arguments are nonsense, and I'm not going to get drawn into what it felt like. And I don't know, you can't prove this. It felt like she had an earpiece direct to J.K. Rowling. And she was going, say this one, try this one, try the, hang on, let me have a look. Try the prisons one. And it's like that, isn't it? Because we've heard all this 100 times before.
It's probably the Borg minds, they're all connected via.
But what did I see? I made some mistakes there, actually, because if I'd got longer to speak, I knew I had to get in there, and I was kind of.
The whole thing was only about 10 minutes long.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like everything she's saying is not her own opinion. It's like a board meeting.
Yeah, it's just these repeated transphobic.
She's not got her own original thoughts, has she? She's become. She seems like a nice, intelligent lady. Apart from,
if you were to sit down with her and have a conversation, like a calm conversation on these points, you could probably get to I don't know, maybe not. You could probably get to a better understanding, or try and make her understand where she's going wrong with some of these things.
It's like she's repeating these things like 4,000%. Now, 4,000% of what?
Like,
5 children. So
5,000%.
if you have 10 children going for a gender doing to a gender clinic, and then there's suddenly 15, and then there's suddenly 20. What is that? Is that what she's talking about? Because
well, she's talking. Yeah, but I mean, percentages is dangerous to use. Let's hear the actual numbers. It's much better.
yeah, because percentages, you've got to know what the sample is. What you need is,
if you start with 1 and you get to 20, that's a huge percentage jump.
yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it? Really? I mean, when I talked about, Whitehall and this kind of, because I'm talking about Tufton Street, but that's what this is. That's what talk radio like, and I can see they've got a brand there to because there's a lot of people that watch this, and if you look at their Twitter feed, if you look at the comments on some of there was another trans person on today, actually. I can't remember the name now because I was at work when I saw it. I need to watch it back. But when you look at the comments, they're always the same kind of: men can't be women, women can't be men.
Yeah, it's the same stuff. So anyway, after this went out live, was it on some radio show? Because you got a message, didn't you?
Oh yeah, Mr. Paul Bloomer. Police officer who they made a really nice video about LGBTQI plus inclusion.
Because I think Paul was listening on the radio somewhere. I don't know whether this goes out on the radio show somewhere.
I'm not sure because he said that he was on he was listening while he was driving. So yeah, they must have a radio output as well. But he sent me. I did this, and when I finished it, I was thinking, shit, have I said anything I shouldn't have said? And I think I did a bit.
I mean, it was intense. It was intense. There was quite a lot of intensity in that.
But what I'm conscious of is when I'm there, is because they introduced me as a trans activist,
rights activist.
No, that has negative connotations, and also I'm not really representing trans people. What I'm representing is somebody that's calling out some bullshit. I'd do it if I was cis, and I'd like to think that other people. But the thing is, why would you put yourself through it in a way? And I thought, well, this is why people don't. And I thought, and I was a bit second guessing about whether we should do a podcast of it and all that. And anyway, Paul Bloomer sent me a really nice message just saying that, it's about time somebody stood up to these kind of people, and, you did good. And I did, just my presence. He said that just being there was that on the radio was a good thing. And I thought, well, that's nice to hear because I was a bit, I mean, I was in two minds about whether to do it in the first place because, if I do,
I mean, it's not easy to do those things.
And another thing out there, I do get called out by the community, because I do fuck up and I do say the wrong things sometimes.
But you're under intense pressure to answer the questions and respond to the other person, and you're going to make mistakes.
But I get comments like, "Oh, you should have said this. You should have said."
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the hindsight is great, isn't it?
But I do know what I do need to say in the situation. Like, I don't think, obfuscating. I could have said a lot of facts and figures out of the trans law book, but they're not interested. They would have phased out. They would have just said, "Okay, then next." I've got to say something that's gonna.
So we'll add Paul's message to the end of the podcast.
But it's like another thing I want to say is like this idea that I've said it already about this idea that we suddenly become trans because the government has allowed us to be.
Well, they didn't allow me.
It's bloody ridiculous. It's like
to force them to let me do it.
And it's like it's like they always talk about man and woman and. But nobody's really born that. It's something that we reach for these things, and they like have a philosophical meaning. And it's not flesh is not a bet. It's like we have a flesh existence, but then that binary definition, like the chromosome and all that, you can bring all that into it. But when we grow up and when we go through puberty, it's through striving. It's like personal struggle, like trauma, and it's like a timeline of experiences. That's who we are as people. It's not your chromosome. Now, I know that is a defining thing about why we have penises and why we have vaginas, but it's like some people talk about this as that's what you are. Like, you're defined by something you can't see unless you've got a microscope. Yeah.
And
I'm just like, this is like, but I would do it again. But I've got to be careful. Like, if I don't want to go with Kevin O'Sullivan again. He was really so. You don't get to say what you want to say on my show.
I think he was more concerned around telling him which guests he was allowed to have on or not.
Well, it's because I could not mention Kelly J. Keane because I put a post up earlier on Twitter to show how many times
But he did. I mean, he did say that you could be the, the show guest.
Yeah.
So yeah, take him up on that.
Well, I'm going to give him a call and
give him a call and say,
if I could,
Kevin, I've got some ideas for some shows, some guests. Can we have a talk about it? Yeah?
Well, you see, I have talked to other trans women, and I have said to, like, I talked to Katie Montgomery, and I said, look, because she's done this kind of thing, and I said, why don't you do it? You do it. Go on this thing, and it's like, why am I trying to get other people to do my dirty work?
No, but Paul, I think Paul makes a comment on that, doesn't he? Around some of the big organizations not wanting to do it for valid reasons, but we still need to have a trans voice in these things, and you're prepared to give it a go. And it's not. I don't think I could do it, but I have
the luxury as if I just represent myself. I'm not an organization, am I? So. No. Well, we are an organization.
Well,
we're gender nebulous.
We're nebulous.
Gender fabulous. And on that note, don't forget to subscribe. And thanks for listening. And have you got anything you want to add before we sign out?
No, thanks for listening. Please subscribe. Come back and listen to the nonsense again.
And Happy New Year.
And well, it's not Christmas yet, so happy Christmas first.
Well, I didn't know when we're going to put this out, so I was tactically leaving that open.
You're tactically, and I put my big foot in it. So okay, so it's probably going to go out.
You can edit it if you want.
Probably tomorrow, which is just before Christmas. So
I'm gonna keep myself quiet now.
Let's mute Freda. Yeah, she stopped talking. Wow, I can just talk forever now. Is that no? I won't do. Anyway.
I was just going to say that's the feedback we're getting from the podcast is I talk too much.
Yeah, well, I think we already knew that, didn't
we? Okay.
I am in charge of the mute button. I may use it one day. So
don't forget
to subscribe.
Yes.
Bye.
Hiya, Freda, live from the loft here. Just wanted to tell you that I heard you on the radio on my way home the other night, and I thought that you did brilliantly. It's really refreshing to hear the voice of a trans person, in the midst of this debate, because I feel like that's lost an awful lot of the time. We hear lots of people talking about trans people, but we don't actually hear from trans people. So, and it was clear that was a pretty hostile thing that you'd stepped into. And I just want to really say to you that I really appreciate you doing that. I know it's difficult. I know it's really difficult being a visible LGBT person in the public space at the moment. I know it's really difficult to step into a debate where they're discussing the fundamental rights and freedoms of trans people to go to the bloody toilet. Like, yeah. Anyway, I thought you did really well in a very difficult environment, and I wish there was more of that. I wish there was more trans people able to speak up in the public domain the way that you did. So good on you.